Ever notice how life gets louder when your bank balance is low? A random notification hits and your stomach tightens. You swipe your card and hesitate for a second. You're not broke, but you're not comfortable either. Then one day, nothing big happens. You open your bank app and you don't panic. Bills are the same. Life looks the same. But your mind feels quieter. That's the moment. When you hit your first $20,000, life doesn't get flashy. It just starts to feel different. Something subtle happens. It's not fireworks. Nobody hands you a certificate. Most days, nothing about your life looks different at all. You still wake up tired. You still open your phone and feel that little knot in your chest when you think about work, school, bills, expectations. And yet, something underneath all of that shifts. I remember talking to someone who said, I didn't feel rich, I just felt quieter, and that stuck with me. Because the moment you cross that number, life doesn't suddenly get easier, it just stops feeling as loud. If you've never been there yet, this might sound confusing. If you have been there, you probably know exactly what I mean. And if you're somewhere in between, chasing that first real chunk of money and wondering why it feels so heavy, this video is for you. Let's talk about why $20,000 changes the way life feels, even though it doesn't actually change your lifestyle at all. Most people misunderstand money at this stage of life. We're taught to think in terms of outcomes. More money equals more stuff, a better apartment, nicer clothes, more freedom. So when someone hears $20,000, they imagine spending, they imagine upgrades, they imagine relief coming from what that money can buy. But that's not what makes this number powerful. In reality, $20,000 doesn't buy you a new identity. It buys you something much quieter and much harder to explain. It buys you margin. And most people don't realize how exhausting it is to live without margin until they finally feel it. When you're under that threshold, money lives in your head rent-free. Every decision has a background noise attached to it. Can I afford this? What if something goes wrong? What happens if my hours get cut? Or my car breaks? Or my family needs help? Even when you're not actively thinking about money, it's there, like a low hum you can't turn off. That constant hum isn't about greed or ambition, it's about safety. Psychologically, our brains are wired to scan for threats. And when you don't have a buffer, money becomes one of the biggest perceived threats in your environment. Not because you're irresponsible, not because you're bad with money, but because the margin for error is thin. $20,000 doesn't make you wealthy. But for many people, it's the first time the margin stops feeling razor thin. Here's where the misunderstanding really kicks in. People think the relief comes from the number itself, like hitting 20,000 flips a switch and suddenly you're calm. That's not what's happening. What actually changes is your relationship to uncertainty. Before that point, uncertainty feels dangerous. A single unexpected expense can knock you off balance. A few bad weeks can undo months of effort. So your brain stays alert, hyper-aware, always calculating. After that point, uncertainty starts to feel manageable. Not gone, not harmless, just survivable. That's a massive psychological shift. You don't wake up excited about your bank account. You wake up less afraid of tomorrow. And fear, when it quiets down, changes how you move through the world. Think about how you show up to work when you feel trapped, when you need every paycheck, when leaving isn't an option. You're more reactive. You tolerate more nonsense. You say yes when you want to say no. You stay quiet when something feels wrong. Now compare that to how you act when you know, deep down, that you'd be okay for a while if things went sideways. You're still professional. You still care, but there's a different posture. Your shoulders drop a little. Your voice steadies. You're not desperate to protect every dollar because you're not one mistake away from panic. That difference is almost invisible from the outside, but internally, it's everything. This is why life feels different after your first $20,000. Not because your life changes, but because your nervous system does. There's a concept in psychology called cognitive load. It's basically the amount of mental effort you're using at any given time. When money is tight, your cognitive load is high. You're constantly running calculations in the background. Even small decisions feel heavier because they're stacked on top of all that mental math. What should I eat? Can I afford to go out? Should I take this risk? Should I help someone else if it puts me in a worse spot?
When you build a financial buffer, your cognitive load drops, not to zero, but enough that your brain has space again. Space to think long-term, space to reflect, space to make decisions that aren't purely defensive. And this is where things get interesting, because the number itself is less important than what it represents. For many people, $20,000 is the first time money stops being just a scoreboard and starts becoming a tool. Before that, every dollar feels like it has a job. Rent, food,
transportation, survival. There's no flexibility, no optionality. After that, some of the dollars don't have an immediate assignment. They just sit there, waiting. That waiting is what creates freedom, not the freedom to quit your job tomorrow, the freedom to pause, to think, to choose. You might notice you're less impulsive, less tempted to chase quick wins, less interested in proving something to anyone else. That's not because you've made it. It's because you're no longer making decisions from scarcity. Scarcity does strange things to the mind. It narrows your focus. It makes short-term relief feel more important than long-term stability. It pushes you toward extremes, either total caution or reckless risk-taking. When scarcity loosens its grip, your behavior smooths out. You don't need to swing for the fences, and you don't need to hide from everything either. You can take measured steps. You can afford to be boring. And boring financially is incredibly underrated. This is also the point where time starts to feel different. Before, time feels like pressure. Every month is a countdown. Every bill cycle is a reset button you didn't ask for. You're always looking at the calendar, always aware of how quickly things move. After, time becomes a little softer. A month passing doesn't feel like a threat. A slow season doesn't feel catastrophic. You're still aware of time, but you're not racing it. That shift alone can lower your stress in ways that are hard to explain to someone who hasn't felt it. There's also a quieter emotional change that people don't talk about much. Your sense of self stabilizes. When money is tight, it's easy to internalize it, to feel behind, to feel irresponsible, to compare yourself constantly. Even when those thoughts aren't fair, they creep in. Reaching that first meaningful buffer doesn't erase insecurity, but it gives you evidence. Proof that you can build something. Proof that you're capable of consistency. Proof that progress is possible even if it's slow. That proof changes how you talk to yourself. Instead of, I'm bad with money, it becomes, I'm learning. Instead of, I'll never get ahead, it becomes, I'm on my way. Those subtle shifts in self-talk matter more than the dollars themselves. Now, here's the turning point most people don't expect. Once you feel this difference, your goals often change. At first, the goal is the number, 20,000, 50,000, a milestone that feels like safety. But once you cross that line, you realize something surprising. The peace didn't come from hitting the target. It came from building the buffer. So you stop chasing numbers for their own sake. You start thinking in terms of stability, flexibility, resilience. You ask different questions. How much margin do I need to sleep well at night? How much uncertainty can I handle? What kind of life pace actually feels sustainable? Those questions lead to very different decisions than, how do I make more money as fast as possible? This is where money shifts from being a source of anxiety to a source of alignment. It starts supporting the life you want instead of constantly demanding your attention. And no, this doesn't mean you stop caring or stop trying. It means your motivation comes from a healthier place. Curiosity instead of fear, intentionality instead of urgency. So how do you apply this, whether you're close to that number or nowhere near it? First, it helps to stop thinking of money only as spending power. Start seeing it as breathing room. Even small increases in margin can reduce stress disproportionately. The first few thousand often matter more emotionally than the next 10. Second, give yourself credit for progress that doesn't show up in your lifestyle. If your life looks the same but your bank balance is stronger, that's not stagnation. That's foundation building. Foundations are quiet by design. Third, be careful not to immediately raise your baseline the moment you feel relief. It's tempting to turn margin into commitments, bigger expenses, more obligations, but the feeling you're enjoying comes from flexibility. Protecting that flexibility matters. And finally, remember that this is not a finish line. It's a phase. A calmer one, yes, but still part of a longer journey. There will be new challenges, new uncertainties, new reasons to feel uncomfortable. That doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're alive and growing.